there's two ways to look at it. It was that Fury was that bad, or Ngannou was that good, or certainly a combination.
This is Jonathan Aguilar here for Pro Boxing Fans, joined by Dan Rafael. It is the day after the night before. Dan, I had to get you on. I know the fans love hearing what you think after big fights, but no way did I think we were going to have this kind of conversation. What did you make of the events of last night, Fury in Ngannou?
Well, I don't think anybody that was paying attention going into this fight gave Francis Ngannou much of a chance to win. I think everybody pretty much respected his balls to go and do this kind of fight. Obviously, he was making a tremendous amount of money. And I'll just back up. When the fight was made, I was never one of these guys that was like, "Hey, this fight should never happen." I didn't hate on the fight. I was kind of disappointed in the fight, not because of Fury fighting Ngannou, but because it felt like to a lot of us that he was fighting Ngannou in lieu of taking a bigger, I shouldn't say bigger, but a more meaningful heavyweight championship defense. And obviously that meant a fight with Usyk for the undisputed title, or even for that matter, Anthony Joshua, or another top heavyweight contender. Usyk mainly though. But so they made the Ngannou fight, and I figured to myself, okay, if he can go make crazy money to fight a fight that everybody thinks is an easy fight for him, you may not like it, but how could you fault the athlete for taking the easy money? Like, if somebody's going to give me crazy money to write a really easy article, why wouldn't I take that compared to taking much less money to write a much more complicated, difficult article that's going to take more time and research and et cetera? So I understand that mentality. But then once they signed the Usyk fight, and that was on paper, okay, fine. You want to go and take a little, side trip and fight Ngannou in a crossover fight that a lot of people are sort of interested in, no problem. But if you told me that he was going to look as bad as he did Fury and struggle as much as he has in any time in recent years, get knocked down and go the route in a 10-round fight where a lot of people thought he lost against a novice boxer, a great athlete in Francis Ngannou, a great mixed martial arts fighter in Francis Ngannou, but a guy with no particular boxing background, people would think you're crazy. But Ngannou did it. So props to him. He put up a great fight against Fury. Now, I thought that Tyson won the fight. I had it 95-94, but the heavyweight champ of the world shouldn't be eking out a controversial 1-point decision, split decision over a novice and get knocked on his ass at the same time. So two things can be true in this situation. You can be critical of Tyson Fury and say he looked like shit, and the other guy give him a lot of credit and props for what he was able to do against Fury, and still think that Fury, won the fight. And that was my feeling about it.
As you said, no one expected Ngannou to really make it out maybe the first 4 or 5 rounds. But when he knocked Fury down, what was going through your mind?
Well, I could tell that Tyson wasn't particularly hurt. So I didn't think he was going to get knocked out necessarily. I think he was kind of more embarrassed than hurt, frankly. Just the way, like, the look on his face, like kind of shaking his head. Like I think in his mind, he's like, I can't believe I just got dropped by this guy. But obviously, Francis Ngannou has punching power. That was the big calling card for him coming into this fight, whatever you thought of his lack of boxing pedigree or background or experience or what have you. But the punching power, for those that had followed him in mixed martial arts, knew he was a big puncher. And I had watched some. I mean, I'm not a big MMA guy, but I when the fight was made, I was curious. I want to see what the guy's all about. So I watched a couple of some clips of his MMA fights, and obviously, he was knocking guys down, knocking guys out. But in terms of the knockdown that he had against Tyson in round 3, you're sort of like, okay, Tyson, he didn't look in like the best condition we've ever seen him in, but I didn't really think much of it because Tyson oftentimes doesn't look like he's, a buff fighter, kind of like that old Larry Holmes style where, he never looked in like phenomenal shape, but he got the job done with the jab and, the heart and the will and all that stuff, and figure, okay, Fury's going to do the same thing. I figured he's going to come back and he's going to stop Ngannou. So while the knockdown sort of, gives anybody pause, at that point, I'm still thinking, okay, Fury's going to win this fight pretty handily. And Ngannou had the one moment that's going to make this event, and which is what happened. And then, of course, he didn't just try to, give up and not do anything the rest of the fight. He kept winning some other rounds. He might have got a little too infatuated with the power, thinking, okay, I dropped him once, I can do it again, and maybe got out of his game plan a little bit, which was obviously to do the best he could to box, to sort of try to frustrate Tyson Fury. He switched southpaw, which I think he thought might, give Tyson some problems. But he was in the fight all the way. And the thing about it is, however you had the fight scored, I would hope that you would have had the fight close either way. Like I said, I had Tyson Fury by 1 point. If you want to argue with me and tell me that you thought that Francis Ngannou should have been the winner by 1 point or 2 points, I'm not going to argue with you. I gave Fury the last 2 rounds, which for my scorecard is what gave him the win. That means he was behind going into those last couple of rounds because of the knockdown. So, it was an interesting fight. I didn't think it was like a great fight, but it was, it was sort of kept my attention, obviously. And after the horrible undercard that they presented, it wasn't hard to trump that. But I take my hat off to Francis Ngannou. He proved a lot of people wrong. I always respected him in terms of the desire and certainly his athletic, is just the athleticism that he possesses. And I didn't take him as a joke. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I actually, you said you thought that Fury would get rid of him in 4 or 5 rounds. So, I mean, just for the sake of my perspective on it was, I do a gambling show with Bet US TV every Friday where we handicap the fights. And my pick was, yes, I thought Fury would stop him. The over under was 5.5. I took the over because I thought that Fury would be extended. And even though I thought he would be winning handily, I gave respect to the heart and the desire that I know that Ngannou had going into this fight to just give it everything he had, and thinking that Fury would also be maybe a little reticent because of the punching power that he supposedly had, that it would go rounds, and that he would probably stop him, but it'd be later in the fight. So I was not surprised that it went deep, but I think everybody was surprised that A, it went 10, and B, when they did raise Tyson Fury's hand, it was by no means a dominating kind of victory.
You said you didn't take Ngannou as a joke going into the fight. There's obviously a lot of people trying to get their head around Fury's performance yesterday. Some people are suggesting that because the Usyk fight was signed, he completely overlooked him. Others are saying that maybe he just had that bad night and he's 35 years old and potentially there's wear and tear. And others are also saying ring rust. I mean, what's your take on what people have been saying about that?
I mean, I think all of those things could be a factor. He is 35. He's lived a hard life. This is not a guy that hasn't had his problems. Whether it was, I'm not saying he's doing drugs and alcohol now, but that sort of stuff can shorten a career when you abuse it for a period of time, as he did. He was out of the ring for 11 months. For a fighter like a Fury that relies on a certain rhythm in the ring, that can be a factor, although not necessarily. And I'll give you the example. I remember when, say, Floyd Mayweather, a fighter that was certainly a guy that relied on rhythm and reflexes and the timing. When he came out of long layoffs, he never looked like he missed a day in the gym. When he came back after a long retirement and shut out essentially Juan Manuel Marquez, even coming out of a 2+ year retirement. I mean, granted, he was fighting Conor McGregor in another crossover fight. He dominated and knocked him out. So, ring rust sometimes is overrated. I think it depends honestly on the fighter. Whether Tyson Fury took the fight seriously against Ngannou, really only he knows, or his training team knows. From the physical look, it didn't necessarily look like he took it overly serious. But I think Fury knew that he's got a gigantic 9-figure payday riding on the Usyk fight. Why wouldn't you take it seriously? You don't want to risk and jeopardize that. Honestly, I think the fact that the Fury Usyk fight was signed might have made him take it more seriously, because my perspective was, without the Usyk fight being signed, maybe he would have gone in there and kind of played around and maybe try to put on a show and carry the guy for a few rounds and make it look good and then get rid of him. But now you've got the motivation, knowing you got this 9-figure payday riding on an Usyk fight. You're going to try to go in there and get rid of this man as soon as possible, because even though most people don't think you're going to be in a position to lose the fight, there is the prospect that you get cut, you hurt your hand, you tweak your ankle, you hurt a shoulder, and now it's going to push the fight off. Now you're looking at a scenario where everybody involved was hoping to get the fight on for December 23rd. And not only did Tyson look terrible in the fight, not only did a lot of people think he lost the fight, he did suffer a cut, not a serious cut. So, it seems awfully skeptical that fight would actually take place on December 23rd. I never believed that in the first place. Even if he went in there and wiped him out, it seemed like Fury's the kind of guy that when the fight's over, like any normal fighter, he's going to want to take a little time off, hasn't, seen his family in a while, hasn't, just relaxed for the last, a couple of months when he's been in a training camp. So, the fight would be 8 weeks away. I mean, how much time could he take off? So I was never a believer that December 23rd was actually going to happen. And I think after seeing what happened on Saturday night, you got to be very skeptical that that goes forward. Now, the good thing is when they made the match, everybody involved, Frank Warren and Top Rank and the folks at Riyadh Season, who are the folks that are bankrolling the fight, they all acknowledged that that was not set in stone. You can't possibly set a December 23rd date before the October fight happens. But the Riyadh Festival, the Riyadh Season Festival, it runs into like late February. So they want to have the fight by the end of the festival. So it's most likely, if it does actually end up happening, you're talking probably sometime in like late January or possibly even early February, I guess, based on their calendar of when this festival goes through.
Yeah, I mean, on that, I don't know if you saw this morning, Frank Warren said that December 23rd is not going to happen now.
Yeah, not surprising at all. I mean, that's to be expected. I never believed it was happening even before the fight on Saturday.
I mean, in terms of, boxing fans are pretty reactive, but I guess you are only as good as your last fight. People suggesting now, Tyson Fury is there the interest with the Usyk fight? I mean, what did you make of the post-fight atmospherics? Because they did a face-off and things like that, but it didn't feel like there was a lot of interest, I guess, straight at the fight.
A lot of people thought that Fury got his ass kicked and lost. It's hard to. People are trying to wrap their mind around a performance. I mean, there's two ways to look at it. It was that Fury was that bad, or Ngannou was that good, or certainly a combination. You have the heavyweight champion dramatically underperforms. And even Tyson Fury, I think, would admit that was not his best performance. I mean, Tyson can be realistic about the way he operates. Getting knocked down. And I don't even like the knockdown or whatever, but it's the whole package of the 10 rounds where he pretty much looked, kind of never really looked comfortable. I mean, I think I posted a thing on the social media platforms, like when the fight was in the first or second round, like I just didn't feel like from the jump that Tyson Fury looked comfortable in the ring. If you didn't know that it was Francis Ngannou's first professional fight, you would say he just looks like a pretty solid heavyweight. And so my point here is that you have a heavyweight champion that dramatically underperformed. You have the fighter that was making his professional boxing debut coming from the MMA sphere, who dramatically overperformed in the eyes of virtually everybody. Maybe not himself, but certainly everybody else that's watching, he dramatically overperformed. When you put the two of them together and that happens, and many people think that he won the fight and Fury lost the fight, and then you try to announce the undisputed fight in the ring right afterwards, people are still trying to process what they just saw. So they're not thinking about an Alexander Usyk fight. So, the Usyk fight is still important from the standpoint that it's going to produce an undisputed champion. But are a segment of boxing fans that will say, well, yeah, you want to have a fight for the undisputed title, it should be Usyk against Ngannou. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I can understand why you're right. It did not feel like this massive hype. It wasn't like, I mean, I'm using another example. I forget the opponent, but when Canelo Alvarez finished winning one of his fights at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, in the ring, then they marched in Triple G and announced they were finally going to have the Triple G Canelo first fight. And people went absolutely crazy because that was the fight everybody wanted to see. And when Canelo had won his fight that evening, it was not controversial. It wasn't like he looked terrible or he got knocked down. He got through the fight that he had to get through. And then we finally got the big fight that we all wanted. Tyson Fury barely got through that fight in a fight that wasn't a hugely, I don't think there was a lot of boxing fans, at least here in the United States, that were like dying to see him fight Francis Ngannou. And the Usyk fight, now gets announced. And so, yeah, it's lost some luster without question. I mean, yeah, it's for all the belts, but everybody knows damn well that even if that happens, when it's over with, the belts will start to be stripped or vacated because there's mandatories in politics and they've got a 2-fight deal and rematch clauses suck because no matter what happens in the fight, there's going to probably be a second fight. So if it turns out to be a complete piece of shit, you're going to still end up having to see it again, which is the price you pay for getting the fight you want in the first place. Really, the biggest loser last night, besides Tyson Fury's reputation, was Alexander Usyk, not because he did anything wrong, but because it lessened the public demand and desire to see that matchup. Because now most people think that, that Fury is going to have a lot more trouble with Usyk than maybe they might have thought going into the fight because of what an inexperienced fighter like Ngannou did with him.
And on Ngannou, I think I read this morning that the WBC are looking to rank him potentially in the top 10. I mean, what does his future lie in boxing? Are there any particular matchups you think that he would be favorite in that he wasn't before last night?
Well, his performance spoke for itself. He obviously showed that even with a Tyson Fury that may not have been at his best, that he can compete at least with the best heavyweights out there. Because going into the fight, you figure Tyson Fury, by most people's viewpoints, was number one in the world. Maybe there was a few people that had Usyk number one, but at worst, Fury number two. And he basically went straight up with the heavyweight champ. So I don't think it's actually unreasonable for the WBC to put him in the rankings at that point. I know that Tyson, or rather that Francis Ngannou, he does have a contract with PFL in MMA, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe his next fight is supposed to be an MMA fight under the PFL banner. But he certainly showed himself well enough in boxing where I think he could make more money in a boxing match compared to whatever he would make in a PFL fight. The intrigue, I think, for him from combat sports fans, yeah, I think they would like to see him back in MMA doing his thing. But I think the intrigue is because of how well he performed in boxing against the absolute elite of the division. That you asked who could he fight? I think any top heavyweight out there that he would be competitive with and make it interesting. You know, whether they're makeable fights or not, who knows? But if you said to me, "Hey, Francis Ngannou is going to fight Anthony Joshua, or he's going to fight Deontay Wilder, or he's going to fight Andy Ruiz, or he's going to fight Philip Hrgovic, or he's going to fight whoever," he's going to fight Fabio Wardley, who won impressively on the undercard. He's going to be competitive in any of those fights, it seems to me. He showed a pretty good chin against Fury, took some good right hands. Obviously, he showed punching power, scoring the knockdown. Great athlete, in great shape. And you know what? As he said in his post-fight conversations, his interviews, that's only going to help him. That was his first time. He's like, now I got the feel of it. I went 10 rounds with a top guy, who was bigger than him. A lot of the heavyweights he'll face won't be as big as they'll be more evenly matched in terms of their height or their weight. So those 10 rounds for his development, if he wants to continue to pursue boxing, were huge for him. So I think Francis Ngannou can get much better in boxing. As an MMA fighter, I mean, I guess he is what he is.
Final question, Dan. Suggestions from people after the fight that Fury needs to rematch Ngannou before fighting Usyk. Do you agree? And realistically, do you think that's something that will happen, or do you think he's going to go straight into the Usyk fight?
I mean, I can understand why people would say that. I don't think that's paramount. I mean, look, at the end of the day, he won the fight. He won. It was close, and he got dropped, and he looked bad, and he was kind of embarrassed to a degree, but he still won. So that's the most important thing. And I mean, the rematch with Ngannou will still be there. And more in living in the real world than the reality, he has a signed contract to fight Usyk next. So that's going to be the next fight unless something dramatic happens. The Saudis want that fight. They've paid for it. Everybody's on board with it. Certainly Usyk has said, he said it again last night after the fight. And Fury said that's the next fight. So, let Ngannou go and do another event, whatever, whether it's a PFL MMA match or it's him having another boxing match, or he just waits for the winner. Certainly, whatever happens in Usyk versus Fury, the fight itself is supposed to happen in short order. Now, even if it's not going to be December 23rd, it's not like we're going to wait 6 or 8 months for the fight based on whatever the contracts were, according to what the announcement was. So, we'll see it, and he'll go and do that fight. And if he wants to take the fight afterwards against Ngannou and do a rematch, so be it. I mean, it'll be another pretty big event, I guess, based on what happened in the first fight. And but either way, I'm good. If he says we're going to do Ngannou next, I mean, I guess some people would be happy about that. To me, you might as well let's get the Usyk fight done, establish the undisputed champion, and then if you want to go and do a rematch, so be it. But again, like I mentioned, he's also got a rematch clause with Alexander Usyk. So it seems to me, again, living in the real world, that the Usyk fight is next, and then there's the contract they have that is a 2-fight contract, and we'll see. And who knows? I mean, Tyson said prior to the fight to a bunch of media folks that after deciding not being able to decide whether he wanted to retire or fight, now he says he wants to have 10 more fights. We'll see if that's real. He can change his mind at any given moment. Whatever happens, there's going to be a lot of interest in the next Tyson Fury fight, just from the standpoint of, was this an anomaly, or is he really wasn't at his best and he's still a great fighter, or is he at the end? Can he rebound? I mean, there's going to be a lot of question marks. I won't say necessarily the big interest, but those who are interested, huge amounts of questions when the next time the Gypsy King steps in the ring.
Just before I let you go, Dan, I haven't spoken to you since the Joshua Wilder fight, quote unquote, collapsed. It doesn't seem like it's going to happen when we thought it would in January. In your opinion, who should Anthony Joshua fight in the interim, and who should Wilder fight?
That's a good question. I mean, the fact of the matter is, and this is something I think that is lost on a lot of people, is just because that giant pot of gold that supposedly existed in Saudi Arabia from a different group of people that were trying to secure the funds, it is still the General Entertainment Authority of Saudi Arabia that puts up the money. Like when Skills Challenge was involved, they were going to the GEA to get the money. Now the GEA is just doing it on their own. They elected to back Tyson Fury against Ngannou. They elected to back Tyson Fury against Alexander Usyk, and I guess the Wilder and Joshua fight is not at the top of their list. So if Saudi Arabian situation is out of the picture, that doesn't mean that the people involved, Eddie Hearn and Joshua and Shelley Finkel and Deontay Wilder and PBC and all the people that are involved with those fighters can't still go make a deal and just make the best deal you can get. The fight will still sell out a big arena pretty much anywhere.
Just picking this back up with Dan Rafael, a few technical issues, which is the problem with Zoom. But we were just talking about Joshua and Wilder, and you were saying that you know the Saudis went with Fury and Ngannou and not Joshua Wilder. So yeah, just picking it up just there.
Yeah. So as I was saying, it's not just because they can't get that money, which is not created from a market demand. It's basically what the Saudis would have or had discussed paying them. Okay, so that didn't come through. It does not in any way prevent the promoters and the fighters from seeking to go some other place and just putting on a great promotion and fighting for what they can make. It's still a big fight. It still will sell out pretty much wherever you want to put the fight in the United States and in the UK. Still do good numbers on pay-per-view in either country, I believe. Certainly, if the fight's in America, you know, there's going to still be huge interest in the UK. Maybe less so if it's in the UK compared to in America. The point is, though, it's still a big fight. It's still one of the biggest fights in the heavyweight division. I have said for a long time, by the way, Jonathan, that to me, from a commercial standpoint, not necessarily in the importance in the sport because there is no world titles involved and that sort of thing, but just from, I think, overall fan interest, I still think that Joshua versus Wilder is bigger commercially in terms of what it will generate, not artificial money coming from like the Saudis, for example, but it's still in many ways a bigger fight than Fury versus Usyk, because as big of a star as Fury is, it definitely took a hit with the way he performed against Ngannou. And all due respect to Alexander Usyk, who was a truly great fighter, a future Hall of Famer, does not have the kind of fan base that either Joshua or Wilder have. When you take two guys with a certain amount of star power, you put them together, it makes for a greater event. That's one of the reasons why the fights between Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder were such big events. And certainly if you put Tyson Fury in the ring against Anthony Joshua, it would be a huge deal. You put the American with the fan base against the big fan base that that Anthony Joshua brings to the table, you make a big event. So again, to make a long story short, just because they didn't get the pot of gold they thought might be there for them in Saudi Arabia does not mean they can't still make the fight and do it. And I've talked extensively with the Deontay Wilder people, Shelley Finkel, his manager in particular. They still want to do the match. They understand that that money might be a little bit less than it would have been in Saudi Arabia, but they would love to go and find a deal to do this, whether it's in the UK or in America. They've said, Shelley said to me countless times, no problem, we'll travel. If you want to go do the fight in the UK, no sweat. So that's still the fight that I want to see both of those guys take. Now, if they can't make that fight, which it doesn't seem they will anytime in the immediate future, the plan is, and we'll see if they can bring it to execution, that Deontay Wilder will fight in the first quarter of next year. I'm not sure who it would be against. I don't even think they really know yet who it would be against. And Joshua, look, he's had the two fights in 2023 against, halfway, reasonable opponents in terms of and getting the two wins against Hellenius. And before that, earlier in the year, which was, he's still trying to, still feeling out things with his new trainer and all. So again, with Joshua, pick a heavyweight. I mean, there's no solid heavyweight that either guy can't be in the ring with. Nobody's going to be interested to watch either Wilder or Joshua fight a complete nobody. I mean, they've had their opportunities against sort of the lesserish kind of fighters. Both of them against Hellenius in their most recent fights, although Wilder's been out of the ring for a long time. Pick a contender and make a fight. It ain't that complicated.
Absolutely. Dan, I appreciate your time. on this Sunday afternoon. Just plug where everyone can find your work from last night and also your podcast. I'm sure you'll talk about this.
Yeah, appreciate that. Well, so if you've watched me on your interviews before, they know I'm doing my newsletter on Substack, Fight Freaks Unite. They can easily find that at danrafael.substack.com. Plenty of free material. We also have a paid plan for those who want a bit more, and also helps the cause. It's a labor of love. But the podcast I work hard on with my partner TJ Reeves twice a week, every Thursday going into Friday, every Sunday going into Monday. One is the preview stuff and the recap. We also have plenty of interviews. Also, maybe not these wonderful video interviews; they're more audio in that sense. But it's a good time, and we do it twice a week. I think people appreciate the regularity. So I hope folks like that take a chance to check it out. Any of your podcast platforms, Spreaker and Google and Apple and you name it, it's there.
And links will be in the description to both your Substack and the big Fight Weekend podcast. So, Dan, there's some big fights coming up, so I'm sure it won't be the last time we speak before the end of the year, and we'll speak again soon. Appreciate it.
All right, Jonathan, thanks a lot.